Hello. If you're not already familiar with me, I'm Dex Gelfand, and I do a type of spiritual counseling to help people get over anxiety and depression, to fix things about themselves, to resolve dysfunction, to resolve personas that we fall into that are not ourselves, to resolve blocks and fixed attitudes that get in our way, and so forth. And I call my practice therapeutic spiritual counseling. And I want to talk about what really makes a good therapeutic spiritual counseling session and what really makes somebody a good counselor. And when I say a good counselor, I'm not just talking about in my particular field or my particular approach of therapeutic spiritual counseling. Some people have had the idea that you can train somebody to be a good therapist, psychologist, or in Scientology, which I spent several years involved with. They call it an auditor. Make no mistake, I'm not a Scientologist. As I've explained before, there are many things built into the techniques and principles that are not empowering for a person. And there are also some things in Scientology that can be very, very spiritually profitable if done with good intent and by somebody who is capable of doing it well for the right reasons. But as I've said before, I'm not a Scientologist. I don't endorse Scientology. It's one of many or several different subjects that I've studied, researched, and learned a bit about in my path, which has taken me where I am now. And particularly, I mention my Scientology experience in relation to this because the basic premise that I found to be true is that a good spiritual counselor or therapist or whatever term you might use or might be appropriate, a good counselor is not so much made as born. You either have that passion to be a healer for other people, to help them with their troubles, to make them happier, to make them more capable, to grant to them, to help them to arrive at being the best version of themselves and achieve their own goals for how they want to be. You either have that passion or you don't. And Scientology is an excellent example of how this proves out because during my time studying in Scientology, it's very much insisted, stated, and promoted that Scientology says we can make anybody into a good auditor or counselor. And there were some people, and I probably, who can do well with that, who can mostly accomplish some very good things. But it's not because of their training or their training level. It's because of who they are and what's important to them, and because of their passion to help other people. That passion to help other people is the key driving force. And it can transcend whatever paradigm or approach or techniques being used, because a person like that will connect with you. They'll connect with you. They'll be sensitive to what you're manifesting, what's happening within you, and what you need. And that's always been my driving force. I can say that as early as 10 years old, I knew this about myself. I knew that's what I should be doing. I had a sense about this. I realized, I've said this many times, that if you understood why a person behaved the way they did, said the things they said, then you wouldn't be upset with them. Otherwise, in cases where what they were doing would be offensive to you, it doesn't mean that you would agree with their actions or statements, but you would understand. Just as it's easier for you to understand if a close family member, a close friend, makes some bad missteps and gets into trouble, and a lot of people are very angry at them and want to punish them, you will have empathy, you'll have sympathy, because you'll have a better understanding of what that person's been through and recognize the good in them. Empathy is a quality that is best applied by everyone, with everyone. And so if you had that understanding of a person, even if they were basically a stranger to you, but if you could just accept what's coming out of their mind, connect with that, and understand what has driven them to behave the way they do, you wouldn't be upset with them. And that's a very important factor. Now, as I said, in Scientology, they say we can make anybody a good counselor, or in their word counselor, their word auditor. We can train anybody to be a good auditor. It's just, it's so not true. And I think many of my acquaintances and all my friends in Scientology have found that out for themselves, that not every auditor they've attempted to work with has necessarily worked out. I'm thinking of one very humorous example. This was back in about 1981 when I was part of a big training effort where the leadership of Scientology decided that every organization should send several people to a central training organization to create a lot more Scientology counselors or auditors. So each organization picked among the people who were really qualified and wanted to go, and the people that they felt they could most easily dispense with to fill their quotas. And a couple of us really shined. Some of us did not. And I will never forget sitting in one of the training areas, actually what was called the internship room, and somebody had left a clipboard there for one particular student who just wasn't getting it. He was just lost. It wasn't for him. It's not his fault. He didn't choose to be a counselor. He didn't choose to heal people spiritually. He somehow got drawn into the organization, got talked into joining the staff, and then was sent out to this other organization in Miami to be trained to be an auditor. He was just a fish out of water, as several people were at least there. But I'll never forget looking at this clipboard. He was struggling with everything, and it was frustrating. And so he was told to write down every question he had about what he'd been training in and what he'd been studying. And it was a pretty long list. And I'll never forget that one of his questions was, if I'm a level 3 Scientology auditor, then how come I'm so dumb? And the supervisor had written in red ink underneath that question, he wrote, "Good question." I mean, that wasn't really nice, but it kind of illustrates the point. You know, you either have this passion in you and it will drive you, or you don't. If you don't, then you pursue the things you are passionate about. But as I've developed what I do, therapeutic spiritual counseling, I have developed several techniques based on the different types of what I call spiritual architectures or mental mechanisms that take us down, that hold us down, that make us act the ways we don't want to act, that make us feel like we can't succeed, that make us go in wrong directions, and things like that. And my knowledge about these things comes about from a certain amount of training, studying many things, researching things. But I think it comes about primarily from my own ability to connect with all the people I've given sessions to, or even people I've spoken with, and to really connect because I'm passionate to be this healer, as I'm sure many of us are, and to connect with the person well enough to feel and see what's happening within them and notice the commonalities of different mental mechanisms well enough to define them and to see into how to sort of reverse engineer them, raise a person's consciousness to spiritually digest the pain and the fear that they're not connecting with within themselves that holds these mechanisms in place, and things that they use to try to keep away the pain and fear, the things that will drive a person to not be themselves, to take on a persona, a substitute presence, because they are not comfortable with being present and experiencing the present environment and the person in front of them because of such pains and such fears. This is Bobby. Say hi, Bobby. You get to be in the video since you joined me here, Bobby. Okay, good boy. He's a Maine Coon, very beautiful animal. Anyway, what I'm saying is that somebody who is really passionate about such things, it's very important that you have the intelligence to maintain your sovereignty through anything you study or anything you train in. Now, I've been currently training so far about 12 people in using my techniques and learning my approach. But the first thing I make clear to everyone I mentor is that they are to, first of all, learn and understand all of this, and then operate from their own perspective. Do things the way they feel is best. You have to feel empowered. In this position of being a healer, you can't be an extension of someone else's will. I mean, that's another problem with my Scientology experience. In the culture of Scientology, the highest compliment is that somebody is 100% standard, which is to say that they follow the scripts and principles of Scientology exactly as given. So the highest level of competence recognized in the culture of Scientology is to correctly follow someone else's instructions. And I definitely don't want to be, I recoiled very much at the idea of being an extension of someone else's will, to be a tool. And I make this very clear to the people I train and mentor. They're in front of me because they have this passion, they have this drive. And if you tell them they have to do things your way, follow your instructions, then you're blunting their drive in reality. I make sure each person understands that when they're in a session with another person, they themselves are going to observe things, and they're going to know instinctively if they're connecting with that person, feeling their spiritual architectures and their pains and their emotions. And a person with this passion can develop that empathy, telepathy, in fact, to really connect with these things, and thereby just be present in the moment and know what to do instinctively. Now, I will provide the tools. I will provide the understanding of these mental mechanisms, but it's not the be-all or end-all. And a person who can do this, who should be practicing this, who is a born spiritual healer, they're going to innovate themselves. They're going to make it a little bit better. They're going to make it more their own style. And I expect each person I train and mentor, and I tell them this, to share with me their own insights, their own observations as they work through this and as they apply these things, so they can then teach me a few things, because nothing is ever perfected and we can always learn more. But the main point I want to make is that, I've become very, very good at what I do, and many people who come through many other paradigms before arriving at me and having whatever degree of success they had before, they're finding greater success with me. It's not too strong a word to say that most of the times, by the time the session is complete, the person is amazed at what has happened. That's not too strong a word to use, because it's the truth. And that's because I connect with that person. Unlike other paradigms, like Scientology, it's not a matter of my controlling things as much as my being sensitive to your spiritual compass, your instinct to present exactly what needs to be addressed, to say, yes, it's this, it's not that, it's this, and to be liberated enough for me to grant the full power to express whatever you want to express, to not be concerned with whether you're answering my questions the quote-unquote right way. There's no wrong way. What comes out of you is always what needs to come out of you. And my job is basically to just facilitate that, to encourage you to allow what is present within you to be accepted and present, and to sort of spiritually digest it. We start with whatever is on your mind, whatever is a complaint, whatever disturbs you. Tell me a little bit about that, and then connect with the feelings and sensations and such things as that. And with my connecting with people, and I believe anybody who is a born healer has this facility within them, whether they've recognized it yet or not, to actually feel within that person's mind and soul, and recognize things. Like sometimes I will recognize that something is getting in the way for them. All of a sudden they can't connect with something, they can't feel something. Well, I know that that's a specific form of resistance that they've been using to protect them from experiencing some fear or pain. And it's actually been causing them to make a lot of bad decisions because of that avoidance and because of the attitude they've taken on. So I will feel that within them. I will ask them, is there some thought, attitude, or idea you have that says that you should not experience this, or you should not feel that, or whatever it is. It's always in the nature of refusing to connect with something for fear of being affected badly by it, feeling pain and so forth. I get that person to express it in their own words. And we take what comes from you and we follow that trail and root it out by experiencing all the attitudes and feelings connected with that. That's an example of how I work. It's a matter of sensitivity, connection, and empathy, which is a natural facility of a born healer. So if you're a person who has that drive and has a sense that you should and could be doing this, well, I'm one person who will be happy to train you and certainly grant you the autonomy and the recognition to make it better by doing it your way with what you learn. And if you're a person who would like to experience this for yourself, you can start out with getting a free session from me. But the point I'm really making here, again, is you're either a born spiritual healer or you're not. And there's nothing wrong with not being that. Some people are born creators. Some people are born leaders. Not that we only have one particular passion or great ability. But a spiritual healer is much more born. Even born is not quite the right word. It's just, it's who you are. You're natural for it or you're not. And maybe in just listening to this video, maybe you're recognizing that this applies to you. Well, that's a wonderful thing. Maybe contact me. Let's get together and make that happen. Or for that matter, if you'd like to learn more or experience the miracles and the amazement that's felt through a session of therapeutic spiritual counseling, well, please get in touch with me. I love what I do and I'd love to work with you. And if you are so driven to do kind of things I do, I would sure love to connect with you and let's work together. I can be contacted through my website, dexsessions.com. And I would love to hear from you, even just to get your feedback on what you think about what I'm saying. Thanks.